I'm Dave Rich, Sustainable Energy Manager for NPPD. I'm moderating this panel this morning entitled How Big Corporate Customers Are Changing the Business Model. And I'm very glad to share we've got three different perspectives. We have the utility perspective, economic development. We have a renewable developer and how they're bringing projects to meet the needs of corporate. Then we have a big corporate customer. Monolith will be talking about why they want renewables and their products, how their customers will be using the carbon-free or clean things. So Tim O'Brien will be the first speaker, the Director of Economic Development and External Relations of local, state, and federal. He has a bachelor's degree from UNL, and Doane College has an MBA there. He'll be the first speaker. Maggie, Tallmadge, Business Development Manager with Ranger Power, Masters of Environmental Management at Yale, and citizen of the Cherokee Nation, will be describing their projects and how they're developing renewable projects for corporate. And then final, Phil Joyner is a late addition to the program. As of yesterday, he became the speaker. And so it was a very coveted position. They drew straws and he won. So once he found out what the pay was, he had second thoughts, but he's already stuck. Yeah. So again, we're looking forward to this presentation. Tim will start, and I think we will take questions at the end, so jot them down. We'll pass the mic around, and we look forward to the next hour. So with that, Tim.
I'm privileged to be the lead off. I'm really excited to speak with you today. Dave, appreciate the introductions and for the staff organizing the event today. I love economic development and I love the energy business. This is just amazingly exciting to be able to speak in person. My 6-year-old saw me this morning. He said, "Dad, wow, cool. You got a tie on today. What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm talking to a great group of folks about the things that we're doing across the state of Nebraska." And he said, "Awesome. Teach them good stuff." So hopefully I do that. At least in the eyes of a 6-year-old, I'm doing pretty well. So we'll see how we do on the next 15 minutes of the presentation. But it really is what drives me is building thriving communities. And so I'm the lead off to hopefully tee up the conversation that you'll hear from the industrial side and the developer side and how we thread this thing together and the cool things that are happening in Nebraska. So here's the agenda, and I'm going to spend time on economic development. That's what a big part of what my team does for the Omaha Public Power District, and show you some things that are a little bit behind the scenes that you might have not known about or heard about. And I think you'll enjoy part of that discussion. And then some of the things that we're doing specifically from the utility perspective to maintain and grow our customer base. And again, build thriving communities. You'll keep hearing me say that over and over today. So what do we do? And why do we do it? I looked back. We've been doing economic development for about 50 plus years, the best I can find around the office. We started in industrial development around electrification, and that's evolved into a big way in many facets that we work to help utilize OPPD system assets better or more efficiently, help customers find locations to grow and expand. And we'll really spend a lot of time today about helping them meet their energy solutions and services, which is a big shift and change in the last 5 to 8 years. So we'll speak about those things, but we actually have a strategic directive on this topic today that's driven by our board. And so it's a core value of public power that you heard some of the CEOs talk about yesterday, and then very much held true with our team. Planning is key. I want to make this point. There's a bunch of things on here, but economic development is about partnerships and about success. So behind the scenes, there's a fleet of folks back at our organization that makes these things happen. But I think most importantly, it's the policy setting, the vision by many of you attending conferences like this to educate, to network, elected officials, et cetera. That's what really gets things done. And that's what Nebraska is being noticed for business environment, expansion, et cetera. It's just something really special. Believe me, it doesn't happen like that across the country. And hopefully you'll hear that from my colleagues on the panel today as well. So you don't have to take my word for it. So more of why do we do economic development? The easy things are energy sales, jobs, etc. But there's huge impacts, and you'll hear Monolith talk more about that. You heard some this morning, but massive impacts into our state from jobs, tax base, secondary jobs, supply chain, service businesses. You get a multiplier effect. And so primary businesses that manufacture and have very capital intensive projects that export out of the state bring more opportunities to create service and other types of businesses in the state and value back to the state. So that's one of the targets that we focus on, is more of those value creating projects as well. And we're doing quite well at the state of Nebraska from that aspect. Taxes is a big thing that comes up. And so the impact that you can make from an investment in a new business or renewable energy facility, some contractor, maybe perhaps in the state, to supply energy to on one of your facilities also makes a big difference. So what does that look like? And so a lot of times people ask me, what is important to an economic development prospect? Not to speak for Monolith, but what's a company look for to grow and expand here? Because they have options. A lot of multinational companies have significant options. So one thing that is continuing to increase is utilities in a big way. So on the second tack on my slide there, area development does a very detailed survey every year on the important things for location decisions. 2 years ago, cost and availability of energy was ranked 7th. Last year, it moved up to 3rd, which is really impressive. And I think a big part of why we're having the conversations that we're having today. So that continues to be such a big part. And in that is the planning for location and growth. And that relates into workforce, logistics, site development, supply chain. We were just up here talking about supply chain. Has anybody had problems with supply chain personally or professionally? A few, right? Big issues we're trying to think about. So it's the process of elimination. And so I put the easy button on here because that's really what we're trying to do from an economic development aspect, is make it easy for businesses to grow in downtowns, expand their location, or frankly come new to the state. The other piece that's becoming very important is permitting and local leadership and local governance. You'll hear me talk about that in a couple slides. So what does that look like? Nebraska's a big, sorry, here, computer's telling me. There we go. Nebraska's a vast state. I grew up in the middle part of the state in Ord, Nebraska, vast, beautiful country. It's not easy to find places to locate things, and it's becoming more and more challenging to locate near infrastructure. And so these are some of the things that we look at. It's just an illustrative list of for new businesses, but also our infrastructure for transmission, generating facility projects, those kinds of things, substations. Pretty significant list that we go through to think about where we might want to locate or expand a facility. Thank you for your help there. Okay. It takes time. And so behind the scenes, before the public even knows about a new facility or a new business to the state, it often takes a year. And I don't know, it seems to me it's pretty scientific. I've looked back at every project I've worked on, from Amazon to Google and Facebook and big names. It takes a year, regardless of what it is, even a Main Street business, to make a decision and get through the processes. So there's that, there's the local permitting and processes, and there's construction. And then on side of that, we're starting to see customers or prospective customers that want a renewable situation, or in OPPD's case, for our needs. And so there's a significant timeline to bring needed infrastructure online. What do we get asked about? That's another question I get a lot of. What are companies asking for? And this has been the traditional list. I would call it a little bit around some evolution of rates, reliability, renewables, and then relationships are very critical in that aspect. And I'll speak more on the renewable front in a few slides. We get asked a lot of different things, and it's continuing to increase because companies are making long-term decisions, and energy, as you heard me talk about, continues to be so important in that selection process. it takes vision and it takes time. We've had some success. I'm a pretty humble person, but I do want to brag just a little bit on some neat things that have occurred from vision by so many leaders. Again, economic development is a partnership game to build thriving communities. We've had huge success. Nebraska's been known across the country for success we've had in growth, unemployment, job creation, investment, and it's some steadfast leadership on all levels of local government, state government, and our elected boards and others to drive that growth. Persistence matters, and so we've learned a lot of getting companies here. And when we lose, the losing percentage is actually pretty high. We lose probably 90% of the time. Many of you might not know that, on new business opportunities. One story that I tell, I've worked with Facebook since 2011, believe it or not. And it took 3 times for them to look at our state to finally build here and expand here. And they're growing in a big way. They've actually doubled their size of their facility announcement earlier in April of this year. We're leading the way. We're listening to customers. We're hearing about what some of the trends are. One of the things that we heard 4 or 5 years ago was a trend of market-based energy rates. And so you may have heard me speak a few years ago or others talk about the importance of market-based energy rates. So a customer, typically a large customer, can develop renewables in some location and offset that with a market-based rate if the renewables are going to the Southwest Power Pool market. That's been successful and really been an exciting point for the Omaha Public Power District, and we've led the way in that aspect. And we're trying to think about other solutions as customers want more real-time energy shaping and those kinds of things as well. So that's been a big trend. Site development has been huge. We've been successful in our region by locating properties for development, and these take quite a bit of time to uncover and think about. And that's even small properties from even downtown revitalization to larger aspects. We're doing some work in different parts of Omaha right now as well. And we've been happily receiving some accolades by our efforts. I want to show this case study. There's a lot on planning yesterday, and transmission, I think many know, it's millions of dollars per mile on construction. It's really probably the most expensive infrastructure piece. Certainly roads, sewer, water, land design, then all the public infrastructure to make that work. Huge investments. And so there needs to be some thought and collectiveness of doing things in a visionary way. So one of the things that we were great leaders and partners in is this corridor in Sarpy County. So this is Highway 50. If you see it going north and south, and the interstate I-80 is up in the corner. I tell this story because it's an interesting one that relates to energy. OPPD had bought some substation land, I think in 2010 or something like that. For some time in the next 10 to 15 years was the plan. And we had some business interest in that area, but we weren't having sites. And so we got together with the cities and the county and Metropolitan Utilities District and others to plan this out. So we did a master plan. We had some engineering firms help us. We had a vision. And we started selling and promoting that. We had Travelers Insurance that was interested, and they wanted to build a data center in this location. We could serve them without a substation, but they really wanted us to accelerate it. And so we accelerated that 10 years before it was needed. And that helped spark water, sewer, roads, and all those kinds of things. In this area, you can look on the right side. There's huge names there. Amazon is kind of in the top right corner. There's other warehouse being built, which is really significant. Oxbow Animal Health, which is a really cool Nebraska story. If you haven't heard about them, check them out. Google, Facebook, Travelers, all in this area because of growth and a targeted focus for infrastructure, quite frankly, in that area. And that's brought investment across the state with wind and renewables to support that need and OPPD's need. Facebook, for example, has a purchase power agreement up in the northeast part of the state, the Rattlesnake Wind Project, to help offset their usage here. So what does it look like going forward? I have just a couple slides left. There is a lot evolving. And so I tried to capture this on implications for growth. Sites are critical for people to land. If you came to our region and said, I need a rail-served industrial site to do some type of manufacturing or logistics near the Omaha area, and you need 50 acres. It's nearly impossible to find, believe it or not. And so we're doing a lot of work to think about where we locate the next types of businesses. Lots of electrical system planning is underway. It's just a continual iterative process. I'm also finding a lot of education from when customers are asking about trends, et cetera, of what are they really seeking? So we'll have customers say, we want to be 100% renewable. Well, tell me about that. Do you want to offset the increment of carbon that OPPD produces? So is that 60% of your load? Do you want to be 100% of your load? Is it a cost issue to you? Is it a product and services interest in understanding? What's your time frame for all these things? It's interesting the amount of education and discussion that we've had on those fronts with many customers, just seeking to understand. So we've been in this very significant education space. It's also risk sharing. We know that building facilities on our part or a customer's part is expensive. And so what does that balance look like, and what does the returns look like over time? Decarbonization is another part from companies, communities, and others. We've been very involved in those things. And then RE100 is commitments for renewable energy. Many of you maybe are familiar with that. That's impacting how our customers are looking at where their energy comes from. Some of the things that we're working on, we are very much focused on acquiring 600 megawatts of solar. We've got 519 to go, as our CEO reminds me daily on that topic. We have a lot of strategic initiatives in setting the vision there. That's exciting. We're working on our 2022 integrated resource plan. There's a lot of product development work that's going on. I was trying to see if Kirk was in the room. I would point him out. He's the guy. There he is. He's the guy you want to see on that front. Site development has been continued to be important, as I've said several times. The last is energy education and advocacy for energy. And this is something that our team has really taken on heavily the last 24 months, is just being a resource for local planning boards, city councils, et cetera, on renewable energy attributes, permitting, et cetera. We found that has just been a space that needs education, and a lot of parts in the state of Nebraska just haven't implemented rules, regulations, and procedures for renewables. So we've been very busy in that front, and are open to any conversation on that topic. So it's been a good space for us to do that, so our customers can achieve their energy roles. So that's a big shift for us. You can follow us on our journey. If you'd like, you can engage on some of the things that we're doing. There's a few of our platforms there, and I think our slides will be posted online, but I'd love to continue the dialogue with you. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you today. I'm getting back to talking in person. I tell you, it was a shift. So thanks for bearing with me. Hopefully my sons tell them some good things today occurred, and I look forward to talking with some of you at the lunch break. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Next, Maggie Tallmadge manages marketing efforts at Ranger Power. And it may or may not be coincidental that OPPD is still looking for 519 megawatts of solar, and Ranger Power has 230 within 50 miles. So thanks, Dave.
Well, at least I didn't have to put that plug. So thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning. I'm excited to be here. Very, very happy to be here with organizations and companies that are focused on economic development, clean energy, and really being responsive to community needs and local needs. Again, my name is Maggie Tallmadge. I'm the Business Development Manager at Ranger Power. Ranger Power is a utility scale solar and storage developer focused on bringing well-sited, community-supported solar projects to the Midwest. We have a portfolio of over 7 gigawatts with over 50 projects in that portfolio, spanning from 20 megawatts to 400 megawatts. So quite a variety. And a number of these projects are the largest in their respective states. Since 2017, we've permitted over 2 gigawatts of solar in the Midwest. And again, a number of these projects were the largest permitted in their respective states at the time. And we've announced over 1,700 megawatts of contracts with munis, co-ops, investor-owned utilities, making us a clear partner, trusted partner in public power. So very happy to be here in Nebraska. And a key to this success has really been our community first approach. We work hand in hand with landowners, community organizations, local governing bodies, other stakeholders to ensure that our projects are meeting benefits to the neighbors of the projects, even non-participating landowners, and meeting the economic development goals of the community. So Rangers constructed has started construction on over 730 megawatts of solar in the Midwest. We have currently in operation over nearly 400 megawatts of solar, and this has been since 2020. By 2021, we expect 0.5 gigawatt to be in commercial operation by the end of 2021. And these are some examples of our projects. For example, 3 of our projects in Illinois, collectively 347 megawatts, entered construction this year. Okay, there we go. Did the slide. So since 2017, we've really been focused on building relationships with co-ops, with municipal utilities, public power entities, and investor-owned utilities. But really over the past year, we've seen a significant increased demand from corporate entities, local businesses, regional businesses, your big names, Google, Facebook, to industrial customers and universities. We've seen a huge uptick there. And for desiring virtual power purchase agreements, physical power, or an interest in green tariffs. And actually, the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance, I think responsible for the Renewable 100, announced there have been 10 gigawatts of renewable energy deals by corporates in the last year alone. So very significant increase. And what do we hear from off-takers? Well, we hear they want to meet the renewable energy goals through virtual power and or RECs. They want to reduce costs and reduce risk associated with their energy portfolio. Hedging these projects and adding geographic diversity to their procurement strategy. We've also have a number of folks that have reached out in terms of wanting to match their load through additionality, not just RECs or on-site generation. And as we just heard, finding compatible land uses for things such as data centers. And this is really the trend that we're seeing. Corporates are asking for more services, more benefits from renewable energy projects. They're no longer interested in renewable energy certificates to show their sustainability goals. And often they're no longer just interested in procuring clean energy to meet their goals. They're really looking for additional benefits, broader social and environmental goals, or even more local, hyper-local benefits. So things like supply chain, looking at our supply chain diversity, for example. And I think Ranger's been a pretty early mover in this field, not necessarily because of corporate demand, but because of our ethos as a company. So what are some of those examples that I can provide some examples of Ranger's actions to meet these services and benefits that may be typical of other developers or happen. So half of our leadership, Ranger's leadership, are women. We've formed a group to support women in our company and issues about leadership, women's leadership in the energy industry. We formalized our commitment in 2020 to diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. We have a statement on our website that you can go look at. We formed a diversity and equity and inclusion committee. We are doing racial and equity trainings. We are looking at increasing supplier diversity, and diversity within the industry. In addition to tax benefits, farmer and landowner income diversification, we're really focused on local workforce development. We estimate upwards of 75% of local workforce 75% of our workforce for our projects comes from the local workforce. And we try and provide every effort for local suppliers to bid on various tasks. And we go beyond just providing clean energy. We're looking at how do we actively improve the environment around our projects. We focus on building projects with pollinator habitat, pollinator-friendly habitat, and restoring natural grasses. And so what are some of the driving factors here? I think we've heard quite a bit from Tim. We'll hear more after this from Monolith. But again, corporates are looking for procurement beyond RECs or offsetting their own energy use. They're actually looking towards parts of the country with a more carbon intensive grid, which we see in the Midwest. And we also see lots of industry, lots of corporate headquarters. A number of corporates may be seeking the physical generation to provide additionality and not only match their sustainability goals, but match the time of use and the geographic location. We see that with Google's 24/7 policy of matching their renewable energy generation to the exact location at the exact hour of their load. And we're seeing a desire for direct community impact in communities, from soil and water improvement to redressing economic and racial inequities, to also local workforce development. And finally, because we're seeing these trends across the country, we're seeing other markets saturated with solar. And MISO, SPP, the Midwest is really becoming a market to procure clear additional projects and meet sustainability goals. And I think it's interesting that it's also, as the title suggests, it's driving changes to development. It's driving corporate customers, developers to reevaluate contract structures, to reevaluate risk. So, for example, typically we do longer term contracts, 20 to 30 years, to keep prices low for our off-takers, to reduce risk, merchant risk, and to access easier financing. We haven't always seen that with corporate partners and corporate entities, that they may seek 10 years, but increasingly we are seeing increased tenor requested and allowed by corporate entities to match what development partners are providing. Another example is that, I think we all know, like the trend of corporates seeking RECs to meet their sustainability goals. Again, that's no longer the model. We have been able to disaggregate RECs and energy to continue providing low cost power to off-takers and partners. But increasingly, corporate entities and businesses want to retain these RECs and additional ancillary services and additional benefits and services. And this is, and I think importantly, and something that I'm sure we've discussed a lot at this conference, is corporates are becoming aware and businesses are becoming aware of the delays and the cost in the transmission queue. So that is an active, and that factors heavily into procurement and heavily into the conversations we have with corporate off-takers. All in all, this is creating a really positive feedback loop. We have the first movers, corporate entities, asking for these services and benefits beyond renewable energy and RECs from projects. And newcomers are additionally requesting and expecting these from developers. And we're seeing this not only change procurement strategy, but we're seeing this influence other utilities to increase their renewable energy goals, to increase their focus on community impact. The Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance actually found that nearly half of the companies that inked renewable energy deals last year were newcomers, corporate newcomers. And most notably, and I'm very excited to learn more about Monolith, is heavy industry, steel, heavy machinery. Their procurement, this sector's procurement doubled from 2019 to 2020. And this is clearly a driving force and essential to spurring the market for clean energy or clean products and greener materials. Finally, corporates are making up a significant load growth in the Midwest and is bringing badly needed tax equity to the market. Tax equity, you'll talk to developers, and tax equity is increasingly difficult to access, despite the fact that we're trying to develop more projects. And I think another thing an interesting factor that we're seeing, an interesting trend we're seeing is just increased attention to storage, particularly with goals to match load at each hour. Storage is becoming extremely important to meet this load around the clock and to increase resiliency of operations. So we're seeing this help drive down the cost and increase the experience of developers in developing storage. And hopefully this will cement the role as well for solar on the grid and address issues of intermittency. And hopefully, I'm going to be optimistic here. Hopefully that also increases the likelihood of queue reform and accelerates the use as storage as a transmission asset to help meet some of these issues in the transmission queue, which are reducing developer ability to meet this growing demand. I want to pass it off because I think it's much more interesting to hear it from Monolith directly. We've seen that corporate demand is increasing exponentially and really driving clean energy procurement. And I'm excited to learn more about your operations and how you're actually building this model.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
Let's give her a round. Good job. I'd like to recognize Ranger Power and 5 other renewable energy developers for their support for the Nebraska Open. We, NPPD, raised money for Central Community Colleges, and last year we raised $75,000. In large part, we had 6 renewable energy partners: Ranger Power, NextEra, GRNE, and Solar, AEP Energy, and Invenergy. And for those of you who missed out, September 8th, 2022 will be the next event. So if you're want the renewable energy and want to contribute to community scholarships, I'd like you to consider that. And then I also failed to provide much of a bio for Phil, so I'm going to take that now. So Vice President of Manufacturing, he's been involved with manufacturing for 28 years. Worked many years Coke fertilizer as a plant manager. So if you have any ammonia questions, he'll be able to answer those. He has a BS in chemical engineering from the University of South Carolina. So you're up now.
So I'm going to take my time and try to quickly move through. It's a similar presentation that Rob gave this morning, and hopefully give a good bit of time for us to have questions, because a lot of times that's where a lot of the value comes out of these sessions. So how many of you attended Rob's session this morning? Okay, so the bulk of the group here heard this. So I'm going to try to focus on several of the key areas that Monolith is super excited about. So first and foremost, our vision is to build the world's leading clean hydrogen and materials company. And so we're going to focus on hydrogen a little bit, and then we're also going to focus on the clean materials, because we have figured out how to take renewable or clean, carbon-free energy and convert it into usable products that all of us use. And most of my career has been focused on, I was in pulp and paper, so I made paper towels and toilet paper and all the products that I shop and buy every day. Then I moved into fertilizer and got very familiar with the corn industry here in the Midwest and how vital fertilizers are. And now I've moved into another industry in the carbon black and the hydrogen industry. And it's just, to me, it's phenomenal to be able to be a part of not only having environmentally transformative when we use renewable or clean energy and convert it into good products, but also to have a positive impact on the state, the country, and then ultimately the world. So we've got a pretty big goal that we're after, but we believe we can do it with the technology that we have, which a lot of it is patented, and we are probably 10 years ahead of any of our competitors in the pyrolysis space. So Rob talked a little bit about this. We believe we can hit about 85% of the markets that are out there with the products that we're making between hydrogen and our clean materials. He also mentioned this. We've talked a good bit about the renewable energy or the carbon-free energy end of the spectrum. We believe that we are working on the opposite end and trying to hit some of those hard ones around some of the industries that are still producing. When I was in Beatrice, I ran the fertilizer plant there, and it always bothered me that I was making about 1,000 tons a day of product, but I was putting about 1,200 tons a day of CO2 out every day. So there are many processes, especially in the agricultural and different industries, where we still have a pretty high CO2 emission rate. Rob talked about this, electrolysis and pyrolysis. We are in the business of pyrolysis, and he also spoke on this. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, on what we do. Carbon intensity, you can see we make a pretty dramatic drop from the standard steam reformer to make hydrogen process. And we believe that it's going to take all the different technologies to be able to address the issue that's in front of us. But we do believe with our technology today, which our plant is operating already in Hallam, and we've been able to map we spent 4 years at a pilot plant in California perfecting our technology, and we can hit these numbers today with our process. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the history of the company, but just from a couple of highlights. We started construction in Hallam in 2018. We finished and commissioned the plant in 2020. The plasma torch that we use at OC1, which I think is a 16 megawatt plasma torch, which is twice the size of any torch that's ever been constructed in the past. The last one was an 8 megawatt torch that NASA used. And so it's a good technology. We've been able to operate that consistently. And we are also in the process of designing our next phase plant that will have 12 reactors in it with 12 torches. So why did we pick Nebraska? There were several reasons why we picked Nebraska. Power and the availability and the future of being able to get renewable power was very important to us. And a steady, solid feed to the plant is another one. As was mentioned earlier, when your number one cost and your number one feed into the process is electricity, you just can't afford to have interruptions. Also, I've lived here for about 10 years now, and the work ethic in Nebraska is just phenomenal. Good employees, good training, community colleges, all the skills that you need are here. The relationships, we have a great relationship with Hallam and Lincoln. Good partnership there in all the areas that we need. Definitely business and official support in the environment. And then because we use natural gas, we have abundant and available natural gas for us. So OC1 is a 15,000 ton carbon black plant, also makes 5,000 tons of hydrogen a year. And those products can go into multiple different industries. We'll talk about that in a minute. but it's fully in construction. It was over $100 million investment into Nebraska. OC2, I'm also the capital projects manager, so we are working with Kiewit on from $1 billion to $1.5 billion job for the OC2 plant, which will be built just north of the OC1 Hallam plant today. It will have 180,000 tons of capacity of carbon black, 60,000 tons of hydrogen, and we'll also be constructing an anhydrous ammonia plant to be able to produce about 275,000 tons of green ammonia for the market. So let's talk a little bit about where we see our hydrogen going. So long term, in the short term, we are going to be converting it into clean fertilizers, but we have a lot of interest in companies also wanting to potentially convert it into green fuels, definitely the heavy transport type fuels. And then the steel industry and refining industry uses a lot of hydrogen in their processes, and they use the steam reformer process today. We've gotten a lot of interest in different companies that want us to build one of our plants next door and pipe the hydrogen for the steel process or other products that they might be needing the hydrogen for. Additionally, carbon black. Show of hands, how many people know the carbon black industry? Yeah, me too. There's not a lot of people that know carbon black. But just to put it in perspective, if you have a cell phone, this case has got carbon black in it. This coffee cup's got carbon black in it, the top in it. 30% of a tire has got carbon black in it. If you didn't have carbon black in a tire, a 40,000 mile tire would last about 10,000 miles. So carbon black is the strengthening agent, the toughness. It goes into multiple things. You can see it goes into paint. Carbon black even goes into white paint. You need black coloring in things to make all the pigments that you need. And carbon black is a very interesting market to be in. We also, we are working very closely with some of the big tire manufacturers as they have green or low carbon intensity initiatives that they want to achieve by 2030 or 2040. And by buying our carbon black and putting it in their tire, they immediately can get a 30% reduction in the carbon footprint of their tire because we have very low carbon intensity carbon. And so we're working with several of them, are actually working on some different demonstration tires, and we've gotten product to them, and we're further down the process. Some of these approval processes, as you would hope in a tire, it takes a while to validate a product. You don't want to just put it in a tire that you and I might be driving on. So some of those processes take a year to year and a half, but we are accelerating those processes with some of the major tire providers out there. We're also selling our product into belt hoses, conveyor belts, carbide tip, drill bits, all kinds of things that use carbon, plastics, and then toner is kind of on the high end. We're not quite into toners yet, but it is a very big market. It's about 19 million ton market. And so as you put that in perspective, the plant that we're going to be building at Hallam is still only about 180,000 tons. So we're barely keeping up with the demand with 1 to 2 of our plants. So it's a great market. We've gotten great demand on us by all of the different tire manufacturers, as well as other industries that really want to lower their carbon intensity using the carbon side of our business. And this slide kind of talks about that. Is we're changing the environmental story, because if you think about the carbon black industry, there's really no one out there that is lowering the carbon intensity in the carbon black industry. And so we're really helping to change their environmental story around how do you make some of the everyday products that we use and want to continue to be able to use, but yet lower that carbon footprint. Rob talked a little bit about this, but just kind of recapping some of the projects, the number of jobs that we're creating, the millions of dollars that are being spent on our projects for OC1, for OC2, and we continue to utilize a lot of the local contractors, local manufacturers in the Lincoln, Omaha, and in the area to help us support the plant. And Rob talked about this. When we're in construction phase, we could have as much as 800 indirect people for almost 2 years on site. So there'll be a tremendous influx of support help. And then we always love to hire local and have people that come back to Nebraska. We've had several people that graduated from UNL that we've hired that were living in other places in the country, just excited about the opportunity to come back to Nebraska and be a part of Monolith.
Let's give Phil a round, please. Okay, so we've got 12 minutes, I think, left. So questions from the audience. You want to pass the mic back there? Here comes the mic. Thank you.
We've had the good opportunity and fortune to work with NPPD and others on on-site projects, community scale. Curious from a corporate perspective and from what you're hearing at OPPD as well from customers, how much on-site plays a part in siting, and are there conversations or questions that you're all being asked about that as well from large corporates that are looking to move operations or build here?
Absolutely. Wonderful question. And then after this, I can phone a friend too if you want to chat more, but it's a big deal. One of the things that we did a partnership with Valmont. I sat and had lunch with some of them yesterday. That was a really neat effort. It's continuing. Some things that we're seeing is just the potentiality of what's available. And so does land use fit to adding on-site renewables? That's one. That was just a big aha for a lot of us to think about, is that right? And then what's the potential within rooftops, around other facilities? So I think that's something that we're working on, is that potentiality standpoint. I think it is very much a continued growth conversation, and it's a lot about education. I mentioned it earlier about what are you seeking? What's the term? What are the goals? There is just a whole menu of options. And I think that's where we're moving to, is thinking about the energy services and the customization that every customer wants, because it seems that everyone is a little bit different. And so that's something that we're seeking to better understand and have some teams and engagement around that effort. But I'm excited, frankly, where it's going to end up. So it's going to be a big part of the future, certainly.
Well, thanks for the presentations. It's great. So I'm struggling. We're nationally taking pride in our historic unemployment. And so I struggle here with what that means for your efforts. Permanent jobs without people to work seems like, we're butting heads there where we shouldn't or couldn't, or what's the approach to solving that problem, I guess?
To be quite honest with you, we haven't really struggled that much with filling roles. Now, we have recruiters and we are reaching out beyond Nebraska at times, but besides some upper leadership type roles, we really have not. I mean, we do have good high paying jobs. So some people are just moving up in the pay scale. Our typical pay is $25 to $40 an hour. So we get more people coming for that kind of pay rate, but we really haven't struggled. We're adding 10 to 20 a month right now and still being able to fill those positions pretty quickly.
I couldn't help myself from one of our board members asking a wonderful question. So I love that. And this could be one we can talk about a lot, but a few things come to mind. Phil and I were talking as we get started, is there's a draw to Nebraska from external. And I think the pandemic helped us, frankly, people moving that direction. The other thing, I can't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but Nebraska has really full employment as well. But we also have among the highest, it used to be top 5 of individuals working 2 jobs to make ends meet. And so some of it is moving to higher level jobs and skill sets, bringing more in retraining and skills. And I think there's some secret sauce in that aspect for the state to move that direction. And there's a conference up the other hotel about economic development and workforce. And so that's actually going on right as we're speaking. And so it's something that I know the state's very focused on, but those are a couple things that come to mind. And so there's strategies in place around that, but it is a real challenge for sure.
Question. Yes, Will.
Yeah, a couple questions actually. Did I hear right that Olive Creek, that each one of those torches is 16 megawatts?
That's correct.
And you're adding 12 of them?
That's correct.
All right. That's what that was.
280 to 300 megawatts.
Yeah, huge load. So how are you guys meeting that with your partnership with NPPD? And then also, through that process, and I guess this could be generically speaking for any corporate looking for renewable energy, did they usually bring in the utility in this scenario, or a lot of times are the developers or the corporates going straight to the developers and the developers seeking out the utility, and kind of how that relationship works? So a couple questions there.
Yeah. So we have a great relationship with NPPD. We are working with them on the design. Obviously, one of the reasons we're there is we have a great substation right there where we have 5 different power plants that can feed that substation so we don't lose any power. And we're developing, when you start getting up to 200-300 megawatts of power coming into a site, there's a lot of development work that's going on between us, Norris Power, and Kiewit on how do we bring that much power in, and how do you get it to where it needs to be. But we're also on the renewable side. We're working with NPPD on a project. There's an RFI out right now for a 600 to 800 megawatt project out there. And so our goal is to partner with the utilities to provide us with renewable or low, zero carbon power, 100%. Right now we're buying RECs for what we're doing, but long term we want to grow the power with us as we grow.
So this load continues to grow. I think it started out about 200 megawatts, and then it was growing, and then they're adding ammonia, and so now we're approaching 300 megawatts. And so, we're building a big substation with redundancy. So it's a major project for NPPD. So, but as he said, it's tied into a very good grid right there, a good location. And originally, NPPD was going to contract for the hydrogen to convert a coal plant to burn hydrogen. And once the hydrogen announcement was made, all of a sudden there's a whirlwind of interest in other uses for that hydrogen. And so that's how we moved from converting a coal plant to hydrogen, to ammonia. So other questions?
So on like $1 billion investment, when you put in all 12 of these units, what's the process on selling all the tax credits off? Or is that part of it, or do you retain them and spread them to your investors, or how's that all work?
No, I probably am not the right person to talk to how we're handling the credits. I think the main thing for us is for our process to meet our vision of being profitable and environmentally transformative. The only way our process works is with, low renewable or zero carbon energy. And I'm not exactly sure how we're going to be handling the credits from the power side to us to future. There's so much out there about how to handle that. I'm probably not the right person to answer that question.
I guess I'm just curious, Monolith, are you acquiring it through hedge PPAs, your renewable energy, or how are you working with NPPD to acquire your renewable energy needs?
Again, I'm probably not the right person. Amy would have been able to answer that question, but I'm not up to speed on how we're handling that side of the contract.
I'll take a shot at that. In January, there was a joint announcement by Rob Hansen and Norris Public Power, Tom Kent, NPPD, with the governor, the announcement that they were going to do a RFP for 2 million megawatt hours of renewable energy. And so then that RFP was released in March. The responses are in. We're in the process of evaluating those with Monolith and the energy authority, company that we own in Florida, and providing those results to Monolith. At some point, they'll be working with NPPD to select a most likely more than one project. They're looking at wind or solar. And then NPPD would enter into a PPA with that one or more projects. And then we would enter into a renewable energy agreement with Monolith where they would pay the difference between the market price and the PPA price, and they would get the renewable attributes.
Question for Phil. What can you share about the hydrogen transport and storage once OC2 comes online? Rob mentioned the transport for the carbon black is pretty straightforward, but obviously with hydrogen, less so.
Yeah. So that's the challenge that everyone's working on right now is how do you transport hydrogen efficiently and cost effectively? And so our approach is to convert it to ammonia. There's already a transport system throughout the world on how do you move ammonia from point A to point B. So there's pipelines, there's trucking, there's very little rail, but there's an international. So that's our strategy right now is convert it all to ammonia. We believe we can clear most of it locally. And the demand, there's still almost 2 million tons of ammonia or fertilizer that is imported from around the world into the Midwest. So, based on our location, we think we can meet the demand of the Midwest with our fertilizer.
And with that, let's give the panelists one more round.